Hey, good people. This is Dr. Alex G. I just thought I'd use my smartphone to record this brief audio prefix to today's episode. One, just to say we're all aware by now that we're in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic, and I want you to know that you're in my thoughts and my prayers today. I hope that you and your family are safe and that you're taking care of yourselves. Please practice good hand washing and good social distancing practices, because the decisions of individuals can have an impact on so many. So please, please, please be careful, because we're all counting on you. The second thing is, it's exciting to see the list of new Patreon supporters. That's some very bright news in the midst of all of the bleak news that's going on. And what a way to help kick off season 4. So a special shout out to Christopher Godar. Thank you. Melvin Jackson, I appreciate you. Ben Lee, woo-woo. Peter On, all the way from New Jersey, one of my best buddies. Barbara Alka, Peter Leedy, Sarah Elmore, Laleta G, my sister, Nicole Fromm, and Mary Wichita. Thank you, Chris, Melvin, Ben, Peter, Barbara, Peter again, Sarah, Laleta, Nicole, and Mary. You have encouraged me, and you're part of the team of folks who help us to continually put out this great programming. So please keep it up. And the others that are listening, subscribe and hit the Patreon button so that you can become a part of that team and get your shout out as well. This upcoming episode is really powerful, and we're releasing it now because I just found this out. March is Gamblers Anonymous, or Gambling Addiction Awareness. This episode talks a lot about this, but as you listen to this episode, you'll realize that a lot of people have resorted to casinos out of loneliness. And so it makes me just think, we've got to really check in on relatives and friends and loved ones. They're taking lots of money. People are giving lots of money away because they want a sense of community. And this has personal meaning for me, which you'll hear in the episode. But please, during this time of crises and the outbreak of this virus, and we're sitting still, let's use technology and the good old-fashioned phones to reach out to people we don't normally talk to, check in on them, let them know that you love them, that you're thinking about them. Enjoy this episode. And as always, listen, learn, lead in, change, and make the world a better place. Subscribe, be a part of Patreon. Help us to continue to bring inspiration and good news in the midst of such ugly times. Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask could they touch your hair?
Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G, a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black like me.
Hey, good people. I want to welcome you back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. And listen, I continue to tell you that I'm working hard to bring insightful folks to come to the studio to talk about their insight, their experiences, to celebrate their excellence, and just to have them share information with our listeners. And because we continue to do this, our listenership continues to grow. We're in 44 or more countries. Every state of the union is listening. And I want to thank you all for not only listening and subscribing, but for telling your friends about it, because I know that that's how the word is getting out. My very special guest here is a member of the faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her name is Dr. Sandra Adell. She hails from Detroit, Michigan, where she did her undergraduate work at Wayne State, but did her master's in comparative literature and her PhD in comparative literature here in Madison, Wisconsin. Her areas of expertise include Black literature, including African-American, Black Francophone, Black Hispanophone. Am I pronouncing that right? Dr. Adele?
Yes.
Modern narrative, literature theory and criticism, continental French literature and philosophy of the 20th century, African-American dramatic literature and theater history. This sister shines, and I'm just really honored to have her here in the studio. I bumped into her a couple of months ago when my daughter was doing a bit of an orientation for her graduate program in library sciences. She was there for sort of a walk through the department, and I bumped into Dr. Adele, and I said, "Hey, keep an eye out for my baby." She's 23 years old, but she's still my baby. I said, "Hey, keep an eye out for my baby," and then we reconnected a few weeks after that, because I found out that she's written a book that's called I'll make sure I get this exactly right. Confessions of a Slot Machine Queen. and so, Dr. Adell, well, I want to talk to you about that. I'm going to have you. There's so much wonderful things. There's so many wonderful things that you're doing that I'd love for you to come back to just to talk about your academic accomplishments. But thank you so much for being on the show today to talk about your book about Confessions of a Slot Machine Queen. I thought you were joking with me when you told me that title in the library.
Yeah, people often are quite surprised. When the book came out, they were stunned. But first of all, let me say thank you, Dr. G, for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, it just feels good to be sitting across the table with you, a graduate of our department.
A proud graduate.
Oh, my gosh. It's wonderful. And the work that you're doing in this community is astonishing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let me get it right. The Justified Anger.
Yes, ma'am. Justified
program.
Anger. That's right.
As I was reading about it, I wish I could have participated more in it myself.
It's not too late.
But the work, it was like, my goodness, look at this person who's so committed to this community.
Wow.
You and your family have been making every effort to make this a good place for everybody.
Yes.
And the Fountain of Life Church, I know some of our students go there,
Yes, they
and
do.
they all come back with very, very positive, reactions, responses to it. My daughter, when she was here visiting with me, her name's Crystal Adele, she came to your church, and she was impressed because she said, "Mom, he teaches."
I appreciate that.
He teaches. In other words, you're not sending us all to hell.
No,
Fire
you're
and
right.
brimstone. You teach.
And that's my style. And the fact that that was your daughter's experience affirms our desire. So thank you for that, Dr. Adell. That means a lot to me. Before we get into to your book, I always have a little fun with my guests. And I have something that's called Black Icebreakers.
Okay.
And I love the fact that you're from Detroit because because I know that there's a lot of cultural richness there. So these are just fun, unrelated things. That there are no consequences to the answers. But growing up, were you a grits or cream of wheat person?
Oh, I was a grits person.
Really? Okay, I love that.
Grits.
Okay, we're off to a good start.
I was
Now,
grits.
were you butter and sugar or were you a salt person?
Butter and sugar still in
I
my
was
hope.
hoping you would say that. Oh, this is going to be a good interview, folks. Folks who listen, they know I love butter and sugar on my grits. That's fantastic. Growing up in Detroit, did you have play cousins that, who later on you realize they weren't even relatives at all? But we grew up like, this is my aunt, this is my uncle, this is my cousin. Did you have those growing up?
No, it was a very, very different experience because I came up in the late 50s. And by that time, the people who were associated with us were real cousins.
They were real cousins.
Yeah, it was very difficult in terms of having play cousins because of the kind of segregation that we had in the community and so forth, and a sense of a kind of isolation. I'm one of 7 children.
Oh, a large family. All right.
So I had plenty of play people.
Sure.
And then those were real cousins that we had.
So you had a lot of real cousins.
Yeah.
Did you have a couch or sofa or furniture in your home that it was covered in plastic?
Oh, we did the plastic. Okay. We did the plastic. And
was it in the front room? I mean,
in the front room. In fact, in the place that I had, when I finally had my own place, I thought that's what you were supposed to do. You were supposed to get some kind of velvet furniture. Mine was like gold and black. And you put this
that thick
plastic on. And then you tell people, don't sit on it. Don't sit on it.
That front room was a museum, and if that plastic ever ripped, it could cut your leg. That stuff was so thick, and you'd stick to it when it was hot.
It stuck to. Okay, we got this going on here. It was like, but we thought we were doing it. I mean, that was the thing.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Part of the reason why I do this, I have a couple of other questions too, Dr. Adell, is I love for our listeners, many of whom are white, to just see this picture that even though I grew up in Wisconsin, you grew up in Detroit, at different times, we have these similar experiences, these cultural experiences that tie us together, which I think speaks to the strength and the beauty of African-American culture. Yeah. Do you remember this? Again, this could be just a thing in Wisconsin or Illinois, but that some of the older folks in your family have insight into what it meant if someone had a dream about fish? Like if they say, oh, I had a dream about fish.
Oh, we got the dream book.
Oh my goodness! And so what do you remember? What fish? What
I
fish?
forget what fish played for.
It was like with my grandmother, if someone dreamed about fish, they thought someone's having a baby. Like there was an assumption.
It's
Do you
a
remember
baby.
that?
It's a baby. It's a baby, and then you look in the dream book, you see, because you're going to play it.
Oh,
all right.
got
So that's the other part of it. But if it's a fish dream, somebody's going to have a baby. Now here's another one.
That's interesting. Yes,
Here's
that's what
another
I heard.
one.
Yes, ma'am.
The older women could always tell when somebody was pregnant. You could not
Yes,
hide
they
it.
could.
They would say something about, I know you're pregnant. There was something in the eyes or the face
Yes,
or something.
they would.
But they were right all the time.
Some of those ladies could tell you if it was a boy or a girl. Like they would say, the way you carrying that baby, I don't even know what that means. The way you carrying that baby, that's a boy.
I don't think there's any science to this, but they were often right.
They were often
So if
right.
you're carrying the baby high, I forget which one it is.
I think they said it was a boy.
If you're carrying it low, whatever that means,
Right.
it's a girl.
But they would
or
stick to
vice
that.
versa. That's funny.
Did you have to be home before the street lights came on?
Oh my gosh, we did. And if we were out
on the
late,
front stoop or the porch?
on the porch.
On the porch.
On the porch. And if we didn't, here comes my mama.
Yes.
Looking for us.
Yes.
And if we were really lucky, she wouldn't start whipping our little butts as we were going home. She'd wait till we got to the house.
Definitely. Well, that way she didn't have to run for you. She could just get you. Now, speaking of whooping.
Whooping. We got
whooped. Did people call these different things? I refer to the kinds of whoopings I got as syllable spankings. So syllable whoopings where my mother would say, "Didn't I tell you?" Did you get those?
Didn't I tell you? And here's the other one. It was hurting me more than it hurts you.
Oh, right. Or let me give you something to cry about.
Let me give you something to cry about.
Like,
but
Mom, I think you just did.
Right. But when we're talking about whoopings, we're really talking about spankings.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I mean, they weren't. Well, I don't know. Sometimes.
Right. We're not talking about being.
Yeah,
right. Go get me a switch. Go get me something.
What about the switch thing?
Go get me something.
We got to go get the switch.
Go get me something to beat you. That's my mama, my grandmother. Go get me something to beat you with, and you better not bring a little one back. You better bring the right one back. You can't bring a tree trunk back, but you can't bring a little leaf.
But these are things that we laugh at now.
Right.
And now it's too, I don't know. When we tell people this, it's like, well, y'all were being abused. We didn't think about it being abused.
It kept us out of jail.
It kept us out of trouble. But we can laugh at these things now because those of us who are lucky enough to have families who loved us.
That's right. That's right, because they were tuned in.
Yeah.
I appreciate you participating in that, Dr. Adell. You know, one of the things that there's so many things that I'm impressed about with you. I found that there are 262, and this might have increased since my research, 262 entries that you have personally made in the dictionary of the 20th century culture regarding African American culture. I think that there are only like 700 entries, and almost a third of them are yours. Now, what is that? And then I want to ask you, the second part of that is, to help me with my future Black icebreakers, are there other cultural norms that you have found to be true or enjoyable about African American culture that I might need to roll into future Black icebreaker?
Okay, let me start
questions.
with the second part first, because I would not want to prescribe this because it's too much fun just having you do it spontaneously.
Yes.
So I think that as you go along with your podcast and you come up with some more things, you'll get them from your other guests too.
Yes,
That's better than having me, here's a list of things, because I can't remember half of
Okay.
them anyway. But in regard to the first
that's a good point.
question, and this was the Dictionary of 20th Century Culture, the African American Cultural volume. This was a series of dictionaries that was they were being produced by Gale Group. Now all of this stuff is online, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was approached to work on that project, I felt that this was really my focus on African American literature and culture. Even though my degree was in comparative literature, as you mentioned, and so there were a lot of things about my own cultural history that I didn't know, and this gave me an opportunity to dig into that, because as the editor, I had to study all the fields. For example, at that time, I didn't study much about film. And in order to be the editor of edit the work that the person who was assigned to the film section did, I had to learn about Black film. So this meant that I was reading a lot of material, and I felt that this was my capstone personal study,
Of course,
on African American creative expression.
So your book, Confessions of a Slot Machine Queen, When you first, I mentioned this earlier, I thought that you were teasing because, whenever I've seen you interacted with you, I've always just, you've always been very stately and elegant and committed and a quintessential academician. And so when you first said that to me, I thought two things. One, she's kidding. But two, if she's not, what tremendous vulnerability to talk about a subject that we don't talk about.
We don't talk about it.
And so I want to just jump right into the book and the subject matter. I didn't know that you were on Megyn Kelly. So as I was doing research for this, I saw that you were on the show, and I watched the entire episode. I've have read excerpts of your book online. Mine, I've ordered it. I wanted to have it in before the show so I could read through it, but I got a chance to read excerpts. But I wanted my own copy, and I just read it online and support you. So I purchased mine. So it's actually being shipped as we speak.
Thank you.
We're going to get into the experience.
Sure.
But what prompted you to want to write about the experience?
It started as a journal.
Really?
My journal entries, because I could not understand what was happening to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, this started in 2005 when I first went, and I talk about that when I first went to a casino because somebody invited me.
Right.
I had no interest whatsoever in.
Was that your first time in a casino?
Not the first time in the casino, but my first time going to gamble. Because I thought, I still think, I'm sorry, I'm not neutral on this.
Sure.
But I just think that gambling, and casinos particularly, is a terrible, terrible way for our communities and our states to generate new revenue. Because that revenue has to come from somewhere.
Right.
And in the process, it's draining communities. And in the process, it's also destroying lives.
Sure.
And don't forget that this is sanctioned now. It's legal.
Right.
And the next frontier, by the way, would be, legalized online gambling. We have online gambling now, but legalized. So the thing is that I had, I got all these other things going on in my life. I love reading. I love solitariness sometimes when I'm not reading or working. I like being in my garden, and this was in the spring of 2005. And springtime in Madison, Wisconsin is very beautiful.
It is.
I like being outdoors. Mm-hmm. So the first time I went to the casino, probably shouldn't name the casino, but it's a Wisconsin casino. I was stunned. Because this time, and I'll talk about the other times I was there, but I'm looking at the environment, and it's like, oh, this is awful. It's dark, and it was a beautiful day. So why am I leaving this beautiful sunshine to go in this dark artificial space?
Sure.
The noise was overwhelming to me. There was smoke everywhere.
Oh, sure.
It smelled bad. And all of these people were walking around all zombie-like, and I thought, this is awful. So just the environment itself, that was the first thing that impressed me. Now, to back up, the first time I ever went to a casino was probably in the early to mid-'90s, and that was Monte Carlo.
All right.
In Europe.
Sure.
All right. In Monaco, wherever, in Monte Carlo. And I didn't even like that. Because my impression of the casino life was, based on James Bond.
Sure.
All the elegant people and people in tuxedos and so forth. And when I walked into this big building, the architecture, by the way, at Monte Carlo is astonishing. It's really something. It's like a big castle. But I walked in and I looked around and I thought, well, where are the beautiful people? Now, granted, it was about 7:30 or 8 p.m. when I got there. If there were any beautiful people, they were going to come late at night.
Right.
But when I saw there were nervous people walking around and smoking a lot. And it was like, I walked in and looked around, and then I walked out and looked on the grounds because the architecture was more interesting. Now, I'm an on-camera actor and a commercial print model. So that was in the 90s. So back in here in the U.S., I think around 2000 or so, I was asked to do some commercial print work and TV commercials on gambling, on casinos. One was one was at Potawatomi because it's an ad. I can talk about that one.
Sure.
That was a print ad. And I remember when I walked in that day for the print ad, our call time was about 5:30 a.m. And I walked in, and first of all, at the entry, there were these like wheelchairs and walkers and stuff. And then I'm looking at it, and all these people here, 5:30 in the morning, they're all looking at these machines and smoking like trains. And I thought, why are all these people in here at 5:30 in the morning? We were taken to where we were doing our, going to be doing our shoots and so forth. And it was probably a half day. We were placed at a blackjack table. And, I grabbed, the chips. I started playing. Sure. And this man said, "Ma'am, take your hands off the chip, please." And I thought, well, these are just some plastic chips. Right. We had a real dealer. It was a real setup.
Oh, I see.
And the lady laughed.
That was some real money.
The lady laughed and said, "I see you know nothing about gambling." So we sat and we pretended to be very happy. And we were well dressed and smiling. That's the image that's projected. That's not the reality. Okay, I didn't think much about it at all then. And then the next scenes were in the restaurants because the food is very good and very inexpensive. All right, so another time I went, it was at Hammond, Indiana. That was a television commercial. And again, it just shows me walking in and being very happy, and then we sit down and we eat, and everybody's happy. Okay, and so none of these things, though, at the end of these events, I left because I had no interest in gambling. So when 2005 happens and I walk in, now I'm looking at this thing. I went with a friend because things. It was a bad day for me. I was not in a good mood that day, and I wanted company. And it was a nice ride to the place, and so we get there, and I didn't even know my friend gambled, and so she disappeared somewhere, and she told me before she disappeared, she told me where to sit here and push the button. It's like, okay. And I'm looking around at these people. They're smoking. So I just started pushing the button. And then she said, first thing she said, well, let's go around and find the good one. And I thought, how
do you spot that?
Yeah, because they're all going to do what they do, which is take our money. Oh, Sandy, I remember this because I wrote this in my journal.
Right.
See, you're being too negative. You don't want to, put this negative aura on the machine.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
So it's like, okay, whatever. So then she tells me to push the button, put some money in and push the button. So I'm pushing the button. And it's like, this stuff is rolling. It's like, this is really boring. And I'm looking around. And then all of a sudden, this machine started making noises. And it's like, people started coming and looking around. Oh, she just won. And it was, I think, $1,180 or something.
So you're sitting. This is your first time sitting at a slot machine.
And a slot machine.
And you win $1,100.
Yeah, about $1,100. And then, somebody else, and the people come. See, they come and they look.
Yes.
At you, and they're smoking, and what a scene. So then all I wanted to do was get the money and get out. Okay. So it's like, okay, the lady came in those days they had people who walked around. They had money exchangers.
Right.
And so they ask you, do you want a check or do you want cash? They want to give you cash.
So that you can use it?
Right, real fast, okay. So she counted out the money in my hand, and I wanted to go right away. But there was something about me, and this is inside of me, that felt that this was dirty. I have never gotten over that this is dirty.
Interesting.
And keep in mind that my background, and I talk about that in my book as the unwed teen mother, the 15-year-old, I had to work for everything I got. And this did not feel right.
Because it was too much too easily?
It was too much, period, and it wasn't mine. I just didn't feel that I had worked and earned this. And the environment, all of this stuff is closing in on me, and I did not know. It took me to write this journal and do my research, to write this book and do my research, what was happening immediately. Whatever my sensitivities are, almost immediately, this was messing up my brain.
Wow. You felt that impact immediately?
Immediately. I felt sick.
Did you leave with the money?
No, because I left with the money, most of the money, but I think I lost back almost $200, and I started worrying about that. Why would you sit there and lose the money back?
Wow. So you have ill feelings if you do play, and then if you play and lose, you've got feelings. So either way,
it was like this was not where I should be. And then I wanted to leave, but my friend wasn't ready to leave.
Right.
So then I had a book, because I always carry a book. I do have a book, and I have a magazine in my bag now. But so I sat down and tried to read. You can't read in this place. They don't want you sitting around reading books.
It's dark and it's loud.
And they don't want you reading.
And there are no clocks.
No clocks. And so I remember this man came by. Oh, I can tell you exactly what book I had. It was Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. Not exactly an easy read anyway.
Sure.
So I'm sitting there waiting for my friend to leave because I just want to get out of here. A man comes and he's smoking on a cigar and blowing in my face. And, what are you reading? I was like, oh, boy, I'm just reading. And so it was like, I just want to leave. All the way back home, I worried about the $200 I lost.
Wow. And not the $900 you were taking home
No.
with you. You already felt dirty about that because you had
dirty. And I stacked it up when I got home. I stacked those $100 bills up on my kitchen counter, and I looked at them. And something was telling me, "Don't go back because this is dirty, and it's going to be your downfall." I didn't think of it in those terms, but I started immediately writing in the journal about how sick I felt, and I said that there's something here to write about, that the public needs to be aware of why there are so many slot machines in casino spaces, period. And that's when I began to do research. And now things change because something else told me to go back to the casino. And after a while, because my friend liked to stay too long, I wanted to get in and get out. I convinced myself that I was writing a book about gambling. All right.
Because that gave you coverage to go back in and gamble.
Right, because I was embarrassed.
Sure.
To go in there, to walk in there. And it was like, I'm different from all these other people. They look horrible. And by the horrible, I mean that they look like they're in a trance.
Right.
And smoking. And so I'm different. So I'm walking around, and I would tell people, I started taking notes. I would tell people, oh, I'm here because I'm doing research on gambling, on casino gambling. That was my cover.
Wow.
As I began to go down really fast. Now, I couldn't tell anybody because first of all, I didn't understand what was happening.
Wow.
I'm writing all of this stuff in my journal. I'm drinking heavy. I love to drink, but I don't drink no alcohol. But that increased. So now I'm drinking. My brain's getting a double whammy.
Of course, you're overstimulated by the noise and everything that's happening in the casino, and then you're drinking. And I want to just put this time frame together for folks. This is after all of your graduate work, so it's
2005.
This is 2005. So you had finished your PhD.
I'm a tenured professor also. I'm at the top of my game. And, seriously, I had accomplished things. My kids have grown. I got grandchildren. And all of a sudden, I'm going down like this.
At that stage of your life, at that point in your career.
And I'm going down fast. And nobody knew it. Not even my family.
Wow. Would you wait until people were in bed? Would you do it in the weekends?
No, because I'm single. So there was nobody at home.
You could just go, no accountability.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I also was able to arrange. I mean, I didn't, cancel a class to go to the casino. I did my work, all of my work. Nobody, in fact, people in my department did not know what I was going through until the book came out.
Wow.
I told nobody. I think I read a section of this when the work was in progress.
Sure.
I read a section. I think that might have been around 2006 or 2007, and at a conference, at a local conference on women and whatever. I forget what the conference was about.
There.
But one of my colleagues said that when she was at that conference, that reading, then when the book came out, she told me, she said, I thought you were writing about something that happened to you a long time ago.
And she had no idea.
No idea. Nobody. It's a silent addiction. And one of the things that's so important for me, Dr. G, is that the next project that I'm working on is called Black Women Speak Out About Casino Gambling. It is very hard to find people to talk about this. When I show up on these shows, somebody after this podcast is published, somebody's going to contact me via email and say, I'm suffering. This is my story. I don't know what to do. I can't tell my parents. And it's a spectrum. But what's very interesting to me now as women contact me after Megyn Kelly, for example, I had people
That was a great
me.
interview.
Thank you. Is that some of these women are upper middle class Black women who have good jobs, some of them are working in positions where they really, like fundraising and stuff like that, where they really can't let people know what they're going through. And they're not connecting with other people with similar experiences. So there is no community of Black women where they can feel comfortable talking about their experiences and seeking support from each other. GA, Gambling Anonymous, does not work for them. The women that I've talked to said, that they've gone to those because it's male dominated.
I was wondering, is it older white male dominated?
Yeah, and they, they're talking and they're reveling in their experiences as being gambling. Right. It's not for a lot of folks. It's not a place of healing. Mm. So in this community in Madison, Wisconsin, there are Black women who are experiencing gambling addiction, but they don't know who to talk to. They don't know where to go.
And so they just stay trapped.
Hey, this is Eli Steenledge, the engineer and editor of the Black Like Me podcast. And I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about Patreon, our service that lets you support the show. And we know that you all love the show and listen every week. And so if you want to keep supporting what we do, make sure you go to patreon.com/blacklikeme. It's never been easier to give to the show and support it. We have a new $2 level, which is cheaper than a cup of coffee. So go ahead and go over to the website, patreon.com/blacklikeme. And make sure you keep the content coming. And we've already started to do some new things that we're excited about because of the Patreon supporters that we have. So we're going to take you back to the show and back to Dr. G. But thanks for listening.
What was your perception, Dr. Adell, of what gambling addiction looked like before 2005, or did you not realize
it wasn't on the radar?
So you didn't even
all.
Realize that people had an addiction to gambling.
No, because my only thought about gambling was it's in casinos, and I'm speaking specifically about casinos and slot machines. Is that it's a really dumb way to generate new revenue for a community. Think about Detroit, for example. Detroit has 3 enormous casinos, 2.5 miles from each other.
Right along the river, right?
In 3 different places. Uh-huh. But it's in the downtown area. Sure. But it's in metropolitan Detroit, and the idea was that the casinos was going to be the new Mecca, gambling Mecca, like Las Vegas style casino, and people would come from near and far to gamble, and they would spend their money. Well, people who gamble do not spend their money in the communities. They take the money and they go somewhere else. That's the people who visit. Detroit is not going to be a mecca for gambling. If people are going to gamble like that and do Las Vegas style gambling, they're going to Las Vegas or to Atlantic City. Right. So the promises that were made to the citizens of Detroit were never realized, yet these casinos are generating incredible revenue even today. That was supposed to improve, the revenue was supposed to help improve public education and social services and so forth, including pensions for police officers and so forth.
And
it doesn't happen, and we've been sold another bill of goods when you look at Beloit. Beloit is going to have a really big casino.
Is it really? I didn't know that.
It is ground is broken already for the Beloit Casino. Now Rockford is talking about having a casino. Rockford's right down the road.
Right, because Beloit's close to the border of Wisconsin, Illinois, so people are probably afraid it'll draw from Illinois and from Wisconsin.
But you see, here's the thing. I mean, casino gambling right now, there's a saturation, and the economists have been warning, the casino industry and governments that we're at a point of saturation in casino gambling. There are casinos everywhere. Now, when you put a casino in somebody's backyard, the people come. Come because, and we're talking about poor people. If you look in Detroit, for example, you've got wealthy people going, but the vast majority of the so-called low rollers. I'm not talking about the so-called whales. The whales are called the people with tons and tons of money. Like Charles Barkley and all of these folks. I'm talking about ordinary Black folks who have a Social Security check. They're barely making it, and they go to the machines because the machines are designed to make you believe that you're going to win on the next push of the button.
Well, aren't there tours, Dr. Adele, like to Tunica, Mississippi? Like I've talked to folks, African-American women who are single, older, retired, limited income, and there are bus tours that will, like, I didn't know what Tunica was. I was trying to figure out why are people going to Tunica, Mississippi. But then I found out like there's a casino there. Who's putting those? Are the casinos putting those tours together?
Some of the casinos sponsor the tours and give them a voucher. They might give them a voucher of $20 to start at the slots because these women are playing slots. They're not playing poker.
They're playing slots.
They're playing slots. Now, here is where the community of ministers need to take into account something, and that is often the churches will support. If they don't sponsor the tours, they will support the tours, and that's something where.
Do they really?
I'm serious.
Well, I need to go to their churches and do some teaching.
I hope so. I hope so, Reverend G.
I think I mentioned to you this in passing. My mother has dementia. Now, I talk about her a lot in the podcast and in writing. But my mom would go to the casino a lot. There, not a lot of times, but I'd call my mom late at night. This is after her divorce from my stepfather.
Right. A traumatic experience.
Her mother had passed away. The church I now pastor started in my mother's living room. Mm-hmm. So the church is established. I'm established. I've got a wife, a family. My sister is married, has a family. My mom's left there with all those memories. And we didn't even know that that's where she was hanging out. It wasn't until I started handling her financial affairs that I realized the IRS was trying to garnish her Social Security. And I mean, I'm spilling all the family tea here, but I'm saying this to help people because if this show is nothing else, it's about transparency. But I realized that my mom had won enough for the government to want withholding, and I was trying to wrap this around my mind. It's like, wait a minute, how could my mom have won enough money that the government is trying to tax her winnings? How do they track that? I didn't know that there are these cards and they give you tax statements. I didn't know.
You have to, if it's over $1,000, it's taxable income.
Well, it must have been over $1,000 because my mom was getting, the IRS was calling my mother.
But she might have won several jackpots. She might have. Mm-hmm. You don't know because there's something, I forget what the number is, but when you win a jackpot over $1,000, you have to. You have to report it. Report it. So they give you a form, just like with the W-9 forms.
Before they do the payout.
Yes.
Now, was that available? Was that the rule in 2005 when you won that $1,100?
It is.
So you had to fill out some
I won $5,000 twice. $5,000 twice. The $1,000 I didn't fill out something for that. I think it was just under. Mm-hmm. Whatever was required. But 2 times while I was doing this, I won $5,000. That's taxable income.
People don't know that.
No, people don't know that. But see, I want to get back to the issue that you raised about your mother. Because if nothing else, we can't stop the casino industry. Right. But people who have elderly parents who suddenly don't have enough money or who are going to casinos a bit too often, they need to check in.
They got to intervene. Exactly. I had no idea. Because
you had no idea until you took over your mother's finances.
Right.
By that time, fortunately, she's got somebody, some support.
Sure.
But what about the single person who has no support system, and all of a sudden the government's coming after them? They're elderly. They don't understand what's happening. You have people now, older people who have never committed crimes, or women who have never committed, and I'm talking about the low rollers, who have never committed crimes, who are now going to prison because they've embezzled from their church.
To cover their gambling debt.
To cover their gambling addictions, debts. One woman was working at a Burger King, and this was in People magazine around 2006 or 2007. That's when I began looking desperately for stories about what was happening here. This woman is an African-American woman. I forget where she's at, but where she lived. But she had embezzled about $10,000 to $15,000 from the Burger King, and she was sentenced to prison. So now what we're trying to do, what some advocates like me are trying to do, is something called merciful sentencing. And that is when you've got somebody who has never committed a crime and they've caught up in this addiction, gambling addiction, and it's very clear that they were stealing money to support this addiction? At what point are we, or the people who unleashed this monster on us, accountable? At the very least, put them on probation. And this is what we're calling.
Be merciful.
Be merciful. Yeah. And so, Reverend G, now I'm getting excited because if you've had this experience, multiply this by millions of people. One of the problems that the casino industry and all the pro-casino gambling people say, well, it's less than 2% of the population who has gambling addiction, so it's really not a problem. But those are reported incidences. Those are the people who are calling into the hotline.
That's what the 2% is.
Yeah,
so that's not an actual number
it's
of
not
gamblers.
We have, because most people are not. Most ordinary poor people are not reporting.
I went to a concert. I think it was a Boney James concert at a casino here in Wisconsin, and you have to walk through the casino. Interestingly enough, to get to the concert, you have to walk through the casino. I was surprised at the older African American folks who sat there. I think I saw someone with an oxygen tank.
Right.
People on walkers. And I have to tell you, it actually it hit me emotionally, because I remember when I would talk to my mom about it a little bit, she would just say, I'm bored sometimes. And you mentioned this on Megyn Kelly's show, how you're overstimulated. Yeah. I think that there are folks who feel like they're not alone when they're in that space.
They're very well taken care of.
So when I walked through, I thought, how did I miss that my mother was lonely?
Yes.
How did it's one thing to either sponsor it through the church or just preach against it without addressing the real need. Right. And so there are two things. One thing you said on Megyn Kelly, and then that leads to a question. I appreciated the fact that you said addiction was a heavy word for you to bear.
It was so heavy.
So you said you referred to it either as a disorder or your experience with gambling addiction, because you wanted to give language that made it easier for particularly African American women to come out of hiding. And one, I want to know, do you think that that's still the case? And then two, what can society do to help provide healthier community for anyone who's lonely, but particularly, this is called Black Like Me, older African American women on limited income? What could we or should we be doing as society to give them other options besides going way out to places and just getting in trouble with the IRS? You work your whole life,
that's right, to
then start having wages garnished. I remember going to the IRS once with my mom, and she just started crying. This was big. She was dealing with the addiction, but also the Alzheimer's. And I had never seen my mom just like cry in a parking lot because she thought they were coming after all her money. So she felt like she was going to lose her house and everything. And she reacted just like a woman who had lived through the Great Depression. And I watched that meltdown. It took me months to find out what was going on, but she thought the government was taking her to what used to be called the poorhouse.
Right.
And she thought she was going to be homeless with no money. And even with Alzheimer's, I would have to show her bank statements that she didn't fully understand, but I'd have to say, Mom, I'm taking care of your finances. Nobody is going to come and take all your money. You got a son. I'm your Social Security. No one's going to do that to you. And she would smile. But I think that fear of not having made her gamble, and then gambling made her feel like the government's going to come after her money. It was very cyclical for her. And I don't know how long she was in it, but I interacted regularly with my mother and didn't know this. And so
she's not going to tell you because
she's not going to tell me.
It's shame. That's another very important part of this.
Shame.
It's tremendous shame. Tremendous shame, especially somebody like your mother or me who are coming out of impoverished backgrounds. I did not grow up with a silver spoon. In fact, a woman on campus said to me, I always thought you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth until I read your book. Yeah. Those of us who come from those backgrounds where we've had limited resources, to waste money like this is shameful. So she's dealing with the shame of it, the guilt. But the other point, and I know we're running out of time, and this is something we need to think about, is that the casinos, because the casinos want to stay busy and their biggest money generator are the slot machines, they treat people, and especially the elderly, very well. They can get nonstop coffee. In the state, you have to buy alcohol. It's not free. In some states, it's free because they want to keep you drunk too.
Sure.
But they come around. How are you doing? They treat them very nice. But this whole bit about having community in the casino is not true because people are only interacting with their machines. Now, how can we do something and intervene? And I hope this is one of the beginning of an intervention, Dr. G, Reverend G, between us. And that is, first of all, we got to get to the ministers. In the churches.
I hear you.
And, I know that you do a lot of activities. There are some other things for elderly folks in the communities, and not just sitting around playing bingo. Activities that we can do. I think Fabu had at one point
an exercise. I know
an exercise class for seniors.
Exactly. Poetry.
And poetry. Keep it moving like that. These are alternatives because we cannot undo what has happened here with the gambling. It's a legitimate industry.
So you're saying this is not just harmless activity? I mean, gambling is not harmless activity.
It's not a harmless.
You're unveiling something that many of us don't understand. Like, it's recreational. We'll walk
because
and
you
do
can
stuff.
probably walk into the casino and put $20 in the machine on your way to the show. You're going to the show,
right?
Okay, and come on out. Because you're not going to waste your money in the machine.
But if the slot machine is your destination, if that's the show, that's what you're going to stay.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to stay.
So, you see, here's the thing. And now by the way, when I was on Megyn Kelly, this book was published in 2010. I have had a lot of therapy.
Okay.
So I was more calm on Megyn Kelly, which is a national live. That show was live.
Right. Oh, it was.
Yes. Than ever before. This is different because this is a podcast and I'm at home with you.
You're right.
But when the book first came out, this was another problem. I was still undergoing and had gone back to the casino after. Actually, when I had finished the first, the final, what I thought was the final draft of the match.
You had gone back to the casino?
When I had finished the final draft, what I thought was the final draft of the book, I went back to the casino, crashed. Wow. I got arrested for a DUI. I was in jail.
When you said they handcuffed you were reaching for a watch. And next thing you know, people were getting you up off the ground. And
that was the first time. The second time was when for some reason, I started drinking again. And I decided to go to that casino. And it was a dark night. It's a dark road to go up to.
Sure.
And I was very drunk. I know exactly what time I left because I know when I took out the ATM. It's all in the journal. And when I got out and talked to my therapist about it, I said, I can't. The whole book is a lie if I don't say something about this experience. But I had to get put back together.
Of course.
Now, think about this. I have really good health insurance. The therapy was paid for.
What if you don't have that?
Thank you.
What if you don't have that? Wow.
So this is what I hope is the beginning.
This is powerful.
Of a discussion in the Black community about the devastation that casino gambling is doing to our communities. Now, I think now because it's all legal and we can't stop the building of casinos, we do need to look at how to put people back together, how to inform people, especially people who have elderly parents and women particularly. If they're disappearing too much, if their finances are suddenly all out of whack, we've got
something's going on.
Something is going on.
Do you know what I've noticed, Dr. Adell? When I visit my mom, she has a lot of friends who are her age, but then she also has friends who are my age.
Right.
And I'll see, I used to see when she was working and healthier, I would see her out at lunch with folks, and I would say, "Hey, that's my mama."
Right.
What you doing? But when mom developed Alzheimer's and people come by and visit her, they would say things to me like, "Hey," they would say, "Hey, Reverend G, I used to see Mama out at the casino, but we had a pact. I wouldn't tell that she was there, and she wouldn't tell that I was there. But I've had caregivers when she's been in the someplace for senior day program. I've had high school lifelong friends say, yeah, Mom and I used to cover for each other out at the casinos." One day, I got a call that my mom was at the hospital. She was having heart palpitations. Mm-hmm. And the doctor or the EMT slipped and said, yeah, we brought her in from, and I knew where the location was, that it was a casino. And I said, wait a minute, Mom, you had a casino? I know another relative who had a stroke or a heart attack in a casino. So I think even that wasn't a sign to me. I don't know if she had such a big win. Her heart started, beating. The environment. The adrenaline, the environment. Adrenaline. I didn't know enough. So I'm saying, folks who are listening, Dr. Adell is giving us good insights through her own very brave transparency. Just check in on our parents. Let's ask questions. If we're finding that, and I'm looking back, there were times when mom said, hey, I'm having trouble paying my mortgage. But mom's had the same employment her whole life, so she had resources. Looking back, there were signs. And so I'm saying to folks, your parent may be in need of an intervention. You don't know if they're driving drunk. You don't know who they're meeting in these spaces. Mm-hmm. And we've got to begin to talk about this, because what we might just poo-poo off is just, a cute little something that you do just to pass the time away. Right. It's not the same as going to the mall and dropping $50, $60.
It is not.
This is something that's very different. I want to say this last thing, Dr. Adell. I didn't realize this, but March is Gambling Awareness Month. I don't know if I'm calling that I'm naming it correctly.
Right. It is.
But I think people need to use this occasion to just check in on their parents, check in on their friends, ask key questions, because there's so many things that we look out for with our parents. Do they walk with the same gait? Do they have good memory? Can they still see well? Are they losing weight? But most of us who don't live at home have no idea what's happening in our parents' finances.
That's right.
So I just want to say to our Black Like Me listeners, look closely. Use March as a chance to think about this, talk about it, talk to your friends about it, because while we see maybe the glamorized version of this, there are people who are losing their lives, risking their careers, risking the health of other people while driving.
That's right.
Intoxicated, and really blowing everything that they have worked for. This addiction, this disorder, this experience seems to be an equal opportunity thing, because it's reaching women who are well educated, tenured faculty. My mom, has an MSSW in social work. She helped me create my nonprofit. She's a family therapist. But there are probably people she was offering therapy to up at the casino as well. Now, she kept a very tight lip, so she didn't expose folks. But there are even people in our congregation who know each other there. And in a tight and tough economic time, this is not the way to grow your economic future. So what we're going to do in this episode, folks, is to put a link to Dr. Adell's book, because I want you to read it. I want you to get it for someone who you know. And we'll also put links in here for where you go if you think you have a gambling issue or disorder. There'll be links in this podcast also. My team will make sure that we have those so that you can get the help that you need. And so, Dr. Adell, please, will you come back again? Because I would love to talk about your literary work, your dramatic work, your acting, your performance, because there's so many fantastic things that are going on. But I just thought that it was so brave. You've written, you've contributed, your work is probably spoken of all around the world, but for you to pause to do something that would help someone else's mother, grandmother, aunt, sister was so, so helpful. And I appreciate the fact that your notoriety and your tenured role did not hinder you from reaching out to other African-American women who may be targeted or at least impacted by casinos in a disproportionate manner. That just means a lot to me, and you've helped me to understand my mother better. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend G.
So keep up the good work, and tell me again, what's the title of the new book that you're working on?
The one that I'm trying to find some narratives for is called Black Women Speak Out About Casino Gambling.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And you pretended that you were researching, but you actually made good on that.
Yeah,
pretense.
but I'm also safe. This is the other part. Yes. I can do it
you
now.
Okay? That's what I'm saying.
I'm okay.
You okay?
I'm okay. And if I'm not okay, and if I thought something was going back, I'm going to be on the phone.
Definitely.
I've got family. I've got friends. I've got Reverend G.
That's right. That's right. You got some
you.
sponsors. My special guest has been Professor Sandra Adell, who's an esteemed member of the faculty here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is a part of the department that I proudly hail from, the Department of African-American Studies. I still miss that department in my studies, and I wish I had folks like you in my classroom when I was there. And I will have Dr. Adell back to talk about other things that she's doing. So listen, folks, this has been a great insight. And part of what we want to do with Black Like Me is to highlight Black excellence and the experiences of African Americans. But we know with addictions, particularly gambling addictions, it really does know no economic or ethnic or cultural boundary. So for those of you who are not African American, you need to check on your parents. You need to talk to your elderly relatives, because this is one of those things that that catches us all. And this is another example of where you can understand where it might impact my community differently, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't and can't impact your community. So show that you really love someone by checking in on them and asking questions that might make them a little angry, but it's better for them to be angry than to be in solitude and suffering in this private hell. As always, we ask you to listen to these episodes, subscribe, share them, learn, and take some action that not only causes you to experience life differently, but someone around you. So I want you to know, as a host of Black Like Me, I love the fact that we can provide information that will cause us all to think and think differently. When we think differently, I think we act differently. So use this as an opportunity to do something to make the environment and the world around you a better place.
Ooh, Black Like Me, yeah.
I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Ooh, Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.
Ooh.